You've heard of war heroes, but these men made headlines for the wrong reasons. From respected veterans to convicted killers, these are the most shocking actual crime cases involving U.S. military men sentenced to life in prison. And trust this, the deeper it goes, the darker it gets. Senior Airman Andrew Paul Witt was supposed to be just another quiet, hard-working serviceman stationed at Robins Air Force Base in Georgia. But on the morning of July 5th, 2004, he became the center of one of the most chilling crimes ever committed by a U.S. military member. Inside a quiet home on Fort Valley Street, two lifeless bodies were discovered. Senior Airman Andy Schleipzig, stabbed to death in the living room, and his wife, Jaime Schleipzig, found nearby in only a t-shirt and underwear, also fatally stabbed. But this wasn't just a double homicide, it was an ambush. Because Staff Sergeant Jason King, another friend and fellow airman, had also been stabbed and was barely clinging to life in a hospital. The attacker? Witt himself. Witt enlisted in 2001 and served at Robins since 2002 with the 116th Air Control Wing. Outwardly, he seemed normal, but something inside him had snapped. The night before the attack, Andy and Jamie were hanging out at Jason King's home when Witt called and asked to come over. Andy agreed, but left shortly after Witt arrived, complaining of a headache, leaving his wife behind. That's when Witt made an unwanted move on Jamie, trying to kiss her. She immediately pushed him away. That single moment of rejection set off a deadly chain reaction. When Andy found out, he was furious. He threatened Witt over the phone, warning he'd report the incident to their superiors. Witt begged for a chance to talk things out. Andy agreed. But instead of reconciliation, Witt prepared for war. He put on his battle dress uniform, armed himself with a knife, and drove to the Schleipzig home. Inside, he unleashed a frenzied attack, stabbing all three victims in a fit of rage. Andy and Jamie didn't survive, but miraculously, Jason King did. Covered in blood, King staggered into the night and managed to find help at a nearby house. Tech Sergeant Jimmy Free called 911 immediately. That same day, Witt was arrested by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. At first, he denied everything, but after intense interrogation, he cracked. He admitted that he entered the bedroom hunting Jamie, intent on killing her. But justice wouldn't come quickly. Witt was charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder and 1 count of attempted murder under military law. In 2005, a military jury sentenced him to death, making him the first airman to receive the death penalty since 1990. Yet the legal battle dragged on for years. The death sentence was overturned in 2013, reinstated a year later, and reversed again in 2016. Finally, in July 2018, Witt was resentenced to life without the possibility of parole. As of April 2025, Andrew Paul Witt has spent over 2 decades behind bars. A former airman whose name now sits on the list of the most shocking military criminals in U.S. history. But if you thought Andrew Paul Witt's story was disturbing, wait until you hear what Jesse V. Spielman and his unit did in Iraq. Private First Class Jesse V. Spielman was just 22 when he joined the U.S. Army. Assigned to the 52nd Infantry Regiment at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, he was deployed to Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom. By all accounts, he was quiet and unremarkable until March 12, 2006. That day, in the Iraqi village of Al-Mahmudiyah, Spielman and 3 other soldiers planned one of the worst crimes in U.S. military history. Along with Sergeant Paul Cortez, Specialist James Barker, and Private Stephen Green, Spielman helped target a 14-year-old girl named Abir Qasim al-Janabi and her family. The group had been drinking and fantasizing about attacking the girl. They broke into the family's home. Green fatally shot her father, mother, and 6-year-old sister. Then Barker and Cortez began assaulting Abir. Green later joined in and afterward shot her too. They doused her body in kerosene and set it on fire to destroy the evidence. Spielman didn't touch the victims, but according to testimony, he stood guard just outside, fully aware of what was unfolding. Prosecutors said his role made him complicit. He didn't stop the crime, didn't report it, he helped cover it up. His case sent shockwaves through the military justice system. He was charged with multiple counts, including conspiracy to commit murder and 4 counts of felony murder. He also pled guilty to arson, obstructing justice, and consuming intoxicants in a combat zone. In August 2007, a military court found Spielman guilty and sentenced him to 110 years in prison, one of the longest life sentences for American soldiers. Though eligible for parole after 10 years, no record suggests he's been released. His sister, devastated, screamed outside the courtroom, "I hate the government," blaming them for sending her brother to war and now locking him away for life. As of May 2025, Jesse Spielman remains behind bars, one of several American veterans serving life sentences after being court-martialed for war crimes. While Jesse's crime played out in Iraq, the next soldier turned his weapon on his own brothers-in-arms, right on American soil. Consider Sergeant William Kreutzer Jr., a soldier in the elite 325th Airborne Infantry Regiment of the 80th 2nd Airborne Division, based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. He enlisted in 1992 and was promoted to sergeant just 2 years later. But what should have been a proud military career soon turned into one of the worst crimes in the U.S. military. Kreutzer was relentlessly bullied by fellow soldiers. Nicknamed Crazy Kreutzer, he became increasingly isolated and mentally unstable. He once confessed to harboring violent thoughts, prompting a brief psychological evaluation. Though diagnosed with anger and self-esteem issues, doctors cleared him as not a threat. For 2 weeks, he was restricted from handling weapons. On October 26, 1995, Kreutzer called Specialist Burl Mays, warning he was going to shoot soldiers during training. Mays tried to raise alarms. His superiors dismissed it. "Kreutzer's just being a baby," they said. But Mays didn't give up. Searching Kreutzer's room, he found a handwritten will. But what he discovered was nothing compared to what happened next. At dawn on October 27th, during morning physical training at Towla Stadium, Kreutzer opened fire from a tree line, armed with multiple firearms. Over 1,300 soldiers were present. Major Stephen Mark Badger was killed. 18 others were wounded. This wasn't just a military incident. It became one of the most shocking crimes by U.S. military personnel in modern history. As panic erupted, several unarmed soldiers, including Lieutenant Column Mike Carrion, courageously advanced toward the gunfire. Eventually, 3 Special Forces soldiers, Tony Miner, Bob House, and Edward Mongold, tackled and disarmed Kreutzer. It was one of the most chilling examples of a soldier turning criminal, and it shook the U.S. military justice system to its core. Kreutzer was court-martialed in 1996 and sentenced to death, marking the first death sentence in the Army since 1961. His name was added to the short list of U.S. military men sentenced to life or execution, a grim chapter in military true crime stories. But the legal saga didn't stop there. In 2004, the Army Court of Criminal Appeals overturned his death sentence, citing ineffective assistance of counsel. In a 2009 plea deal, Kreutzer admitted guilt in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. He was stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged, and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Kreutzer told the court he wanted to send a message to the chain of command that forgot about the common soldier. He added, "To every person I hurt, I offer my most heartfelt apology." Now, as of April 2025, Kreutzer remains at Fort Leavenworth, part of a growing number of American veterans jailed for life for true crime involving U.S. soldiers. But while one man's violence unfolded in the open, The next chose a far darker path, preying on his own, behind locked doors. Sergeant Greville Clarke, a 32-year-old U.S. Army NCO stationed at Fort Cavazos, Texas, held a respectable position overseeing junior enlisted soldiers in barracks tied to air defense artillery operations. But behind closed doors, Clarke led a dark double life that would eventually place him among the worst criminals in the U.S. military justice system. From March 2021 to October 2022, Clarke terrorized the barracks. At least 5 female soldiers became victims of his calculated and predatory attacks. Acts that spanned everything from kidnapping and sexual assault to attempted murder and robbery. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a systematic campaign of violence, all within U.S. military housing. But on October 2, 2022, his reign of terror came to a crashing end. That morning, a female soldier ran screaming from a barracks room, barely clothed and traumatized. Witnessed by fellow specialist Anthony Makula, the woman's desperate escape triggered a pursuit. The attacker fled but dropped one of his 2 phones, its lock screen displaying his motorcycle. Within hours, Clarke was identified and arrested. According to her report, Clarke had broken into her room using old keys and tools, blindfolded her, pointed a gun to her head, and forced her to shower under threat. He demanded access to her financial accounts and robbed her of $14,000. He even attempted to stuff her into a suitcase, and when that failed, he began preparing a storage container to hide her body. Her narrow escape likely saved her life. But this wasn't his first attempt. During interrogation, Clarke confessed to numerous assaults, dating back over a year. His military true crime story unraveled further. He described entering rooms using his rank, weapons, and knowledge of weak barracks security. In one case, he nearly strangled a soldier with a lamp cord. Shockingly, the barracks had no security cameras, broken door locks, and no real safeguards, making it easy for someone like Clarke to operate unchecked. Clarke was charged with 37 counts, including attempted premeditated murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, robbery, and unlawful surveillance. His court-martial at Fort Cavazos was presided over by Judge Robert E. Morin. Though he pleaded not guilty, his confessions to Army CYD tied him directly to each crime. He refused to attend his trial, claiming harsh jail conditions and mental distress, but Judge Morin ruled that his absence was voluntary. On May 2, 2024, Clarke was found guilty on multiple charges. The military judge sentenced him to life in prison, plus an additional 112.5 years. He was dishonorably discharged, stripped of all benefits, and reduced in rank to E1, one of many court-martialed soldiers sentenced to life for shocking crimes committed under the banner of service. As of 2025, Clarke is incarcerated at the United States Disciplinary Barracks at Fort Leavenworth, joining the long list of convicted veterans in American prisons. He has served just over 2.5 years of his life sentence, with no public apology, no appeal, and no chance at parole. However, Clarke's crimes were cold and calculated, but what came next wasn't premeditated. It was raw, chaotic, and so violent it left an entire city in shock. Take Phillip Byrne, once considered among America's elite, a 29-year-old Army Ranger with the 2nd Battalion and 75th Ranger Regiment, stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord. He had answered the call after the 9/11 attacks, serving multiple deployments, including a recent 2-month tour in Afghanistan. But instead of being remembered for valor, he became known for one of the most shocking crimes committed by U.S. military personnel in recent years. Byrne's military record included multiple traumatic brain injuries, including a concussion from a blast and a devastating fall during a parachute jump where his chute malfunctioned. His mental and physical condition had started to show signs of strain. but no one predicted what would happen on the night of July 17, 2021. After a night out drinking with fellow soldiers in downtown Tacoma, Washington, Byrne got into a bar fight and was punched hard enough to lose consciousness, reportedly. He woke up disoriented and wandered the streets alone. Around 2 a.m., he approached a nearby building where 41-year-old Denise Smith, a newly hired security guard, was working her shift. Smith did her job, telling Byrne the building was closed and he wasn't allowed in. But what happened next would horrify the entire city. Surveillance footage later revealed that Byrne forcibly entered the building and launched an 11-minute brutal assault on Smith. He dragged her by the hair, punched her repeatedly, stabbed her in the face with her own keys, and attempted to disfigure her eyes. He then flipped her over and choked her, not once, but twice, until her body went limp. This wasn't just a moment of rage. It was relentless, deliberate, and pure evil in the eyes of many. After the assault, Byrne jumped from a 14-foot landing to flee and injured himself. When medics found him shortly after, he was confused and claimed he had been attacked. But his story didn't match the evidence. Smith's mangled body was found hours later by a co-worker. Despite resuscitation efforts, she was pronounced dead on the scene. Her face was so severely beaten that she was unrecognizable. Byrne was arrested shortly after. He was charged with first-degree murder, burglary, and kidnapping. His legal team claimed that brain injuries and recent head trauma impaired his judgment. But prosecutors argued that his voluntary intoxication and deliberate brutality pointed to a clear intent to kill. In March 2024, Byrne pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. During sentencing, he cried, apologized, and told the court he regretted going out that night. But his remorse did little to soothe the pain of Smith's family. Her sister told reporters that 20 years in prison, the minimum sentence under Washington state law, was not nearly enough for what Byrne had done. Still, Byrne, now one of many convicted veterans in American prisons, began his sentence in May 2024. As of April 2025, he has served 11 months, with about 19 years left to go. While Byrne's crime was a violent outburst, the next betrayal came in silence through encrypted chats and secret recordings. That soldier was Cole James Bridges, once a 20-year-old private first class stationed with the 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart, Georgia, who now lives behind prison bars as one of the most shocking true crime cases involving U.S. military personnel in recent history. A soldier trained in reconnaissance and combat tactics, Bridges' story isn't just about a fall from grace. It's about betrayal at a level that rattled the U.S. military justice system to its core. Bridges enlisted in the Army in September 2019, but while training to defend the United States, he secretly spiraled down a dark path. Long before donning the uniform, he had already begun consuming jihadist propaganda, expressing sympathies for ISIS, and drifting deeper into extremist ideologies online. Roughly a year into his service, Bridges began corresponding with someone he believed was a militant tied to ISIS. But the person on the other end wasn't a jihadist. It was an undercover FBI online covert employee, baiting him and gathering evidence. What Bridges did next would shock the nation. Between 2020 and early 2021, Bridges actively shared U.S. Army training materials, tactical advice, and combat strategies with the undercover agent. He even offered guidance on how to set explosives inside buildings to target U.S. Special Forces and suggested military ambush tactics in the Middle East. He described attacks on American soldiers in chilling detail, offering strategies to increase casualties and proposing targets in New York City. But that wasn't the end of it. Bridges went further, filming ISIS propaganda videos. In one, he wore official U.S. military body armor and stood in front of an ISIS flag, making gestures of support. In another, he disguised his voice and openly supported attacks on U.S. service members. He wasn't just offering information, he was becoming a face for the enemy. In January 2021, as he continued to feed intelligence to his supposed contact, the FBI swooped in. Bridges was arrested and charged with attempting to provide material support to a designated foreign terrorist organization and attempted murder of fellow U.S. troops. His arrest sent shockwaves through the military community and raised urgent questions about how a soldier could turn criminal from within. He pleaded guilty in June 2023. During his October 2024 sentencing in Manhattan Federal Court, Bridges made an unusual request. He asked the judge to give him the maximum sentence of 40 years. "I know what I did was wrong," he said. "I deserve the maximum. I'll carry the regret for the rest of my life." His defense attorney painted a picture of a lonely, mentally unfit young man, isolated, unnoticed, and vulnerable to online radicalization. She emphasized that he had not communicated directly with real ISIS members, nor had he obtained classified military material, but the damage was already done. The judge, taking remorse and mental state into account, sentenced Bridges to 14 years in federal prison, followed by 10 years of supervised release. As of April 2025, he has served 4 years of his sentence. Once a soldier trained to defend his country, Cole James Bridges now sits in a federal prison, his name etched among the darkest chapters in U.S. military true crime. But if Bridges betrayed his nation through secrets, the next soldier's crime cut even deeper, stealing something far more sacred, a child's innocence. Sergeant Frank Ronghi, a 57-year-old Army soldier from Niles, Ohio, once served in the 3rd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 80th Airborne Division, based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. But in January 2000, while on a peacekeeping mission in Vitina, Kosovo, Ronghi committed a crime so horrifying that it shocked both the U.S. military and the international community. On January 13, 2000, Ronghi entered an apartment building under the pretense of searching for a 23-year-old woman with whom he'd previously flirted. Failing to find her, he encountered 11-year-old Merida Shabu, an ethnic Albanian girl. He lured her into the basement where he sexually assaulted and brutally murdered her. Attempting to hide his crime, Ronghi stuffed her body under a stairwell and covered the area with flour to conceal the blood. Later, he returned, placed her remains into 2 flour sacks, and buried them in snow on a nearby hilltop. His absence from a routine patrol raised suspicions, and shortly afterward, he was arrested while trying to hide the body. Ronghi was dishonorably discharged, stripped of rank and pay, and stood trial in a military court. He pleaded guilty and admitted he knew what he had done was wrong. He apologized to the victim's family but showed little genuine remorse during the proceedings. Despite having no prior criminal record, a 6-officer panel deliberated for less than an hour before sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As of April 2025, Frank Ronghi has served over 25 years of his life sentence. He remains incarcerated, a stark reminder of how even peacekeepers can become perpetrators of unthinkable crimes. These aren't just stories of military crimes, they're warnings. Each life sentence and each death row case is proof of what happens when trauma, silence, and rage are left to fester in uniform. Behind every conviction is a victim, and behind every verdict, a broken system. What do you think? Are these just isolated tragedies or signs of something more profound? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime that digs deeper.